Today, I am finally getting to do something that I have wanted to do for years. Today is Sunday, June the 16th, 2019, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm out here in Charleston, South Carolina, at the housing facility of the one and only Civil War Submarine. Yes, guys, the first submarine was not World War I, and if you've ever heard the phrase, before its time, this would be the invention that embodies that phrase, before its time. Alright, so we're going to go in and see this. This thing, you can only see it from about 12 o'clock to 5 o'clock on Saturdays and Sundays. And so, stick around. Once there lived a creative soul just outside of Atlanta. He had a good job but never fit in. He had a big apartment, but it cost him a limb. So one day he packed it all up and threw it into storage, hit the open road, and became a traveling caricaturist. Now he lives in a camper and travels all the time. He works at fairs and festivals. For the price of a single click, you can join the ride. Also, don't forget to ring that bell icon. As you first go in, one of the first things you see is Hunley's first attempt at building the submarine. This one was built in New Orleans and tested in 1862. It was called the Pioneer. I guess you could say the very first model.
Okay, if y'all will get up to the glass and pull back.
Oh my word. My heart is pounding right now. I'm actually looking at the real Hunley. That's it right there.
And you see the hatch cover is still in place. And the aft cover has been removed. And you see the hatch, some of the cowling has been removed off there. But look in the submarine, you see the handles that the wind turn to crank the submarine. The forward ballast tank runs all the way from the very front. You see where the opening is down here. You see a white pipe. Yep. That's the forward ballast tank, and that's the aft. It is white pipe. So, the man in seat number 1 and the man in seat number 7 are responsible to open the seat cocks that are poured into these tanks to take it down. They're also responsible to pump out water back over here. Now, if you look this way a minute.
Okay, that's the deadlights right there. There. It's the hatches. They were about 14 inches in diameter. And it's the dive planes right there.
This is where we started taking it off.
There were pumps and ballast tanks and pumps. And
we didn't know how good conservative it was until we started taking it off.
I can't believe it.
Take a picture to some?
Look, you can still see the hinges on the hatches there. See the hinge right there. There's the propeller or the turbine, water turbine over there. Now you got to remember too, guys, that this was put together before welding. It was all put together by hot rivets and made watertight enough that it could go down. I don't know how many feet it could go down, but it was a submarine, and it was watertight. No welding at all. And you see these like ribs in here? Those were actually added for more strength, more hull strength, because they knew that the water pressure was going to be pressing in on it.
Okay, I got a chair back there for you.
Now, as legend had it, George Dixon had a sweetheart, some say fiance, named Queenie, that gave him a $20 gold piece as a good luck charm, and it was quite lucky for him because he went to Shiloh and was shot in the leg and went through his trouser pocket. The bullet hit the $20 gold piece and drove it into his leg. So he was wounded pretty bad, but if that $20 gold piece had not been there, he would have lost his entire leg and maybe even his life if it had hit the femoral artery. But as it was, it just left him with a lump. And so he kept that gold piece with the big dent in it and all in his left trouser pocket from, I don't know if he always had it there, but he definitely had it there whenever he went out and sank the Housatonic. And then the archaeologists, when they were recovering the bodies, found it there in his left trouser pocket. And guys, here it is. This is the actual $20 gold piece. Here's a higher resolution picture of the coin on a poster next to the actual display. This is a good way to look at the engravings on it. But still, that is an amazing piece of history right there. I mean, you hear of things like, you know, sheriff's badge stopping a bullet, and you know, you always see that in the movies where somebody has something in their pocket that stops a bullet. But this is not one of those fictional stories. This happened in real life. This really happened. This coin saved George Dixon's leg, possibly his life, in the Battle of Shiloh, found on his body inside of the world's first successful submarine. Amazing. Amazing. This little hand-powered submarine was called the H.L. Hunley. Time capsule. It really is a time capsule. But the H stood for Horace, don't know what the L stood for, and then Hunley. Horace Hunley was the designer and builder of the submarine, and it was not his first attempt. Like I said, his first one was called the Pioneer. It was built in Louisiana, but then when the Union troops took over Louisiana, he had to abandon that and then took up shop in Mobile, Alabama, and started working on a second design. Somewhere in there was when George Dixon joined him, an engineer with a limp from where he was wounded in Shiloh. Joined him there, and they eventually came up with this 30-foot long, 4 feet high, 3 feet wide design for the Hunley. And at that point, it was, let's see, what was it? It was July of 1863. And General Beauregard wanted to use this new experimental underwater ship to try to break through the blockade that was choking off Charleston. Charleston was where the whole Civil War had started, and it was still a major player, and they needed to break that blockade. It was getting very desperate. So Harold Hunley gets there, and he starts going around the harbor and making sure that his crew was well tested and well versed in the operation of the submarine. Well, a couple of weeks went by, and General Beauregard's like, you guys keep paddling around in this harbor, and you haven't sunk any ships yet. You're fired. So he fired them all and brought in a crew of his own. And they didn't last very long because this submarine was very, very manual. There was no room for error at all. And this untested crew made a mistake, and 5 of them died. A few of them that did actually make it out, but five people died. And so General Beauregard said, okay, this is more complicated than I thought. So Harold Hunley took back over, got his original crew in there, and they started practicing again and making sure everything was good and ready for this attack on the blockade. And then they all died. They all died, that was, except for George Dixon, who was off on another mission. So he gets back and finds out that, that Harold Hunley's dead, the entire crew's dead, and with optimism, he went to General Beauregard and said, "I know that you don't believe in this submarine anymore, but I know it can work. I know I've helped to build it. I know it can work." So he gets another 7 men and starts to train them, gets them out there. He gets them like honed to a well-oiled machine. They could take it up. They stayed down for a couple of hours at one point just to see how long they could stay down there. Actually, that was the original crew. Anyway, I know there's a lot of things to go back and forth, but they had tested with the original crew to see how long they could stay down there. So finally they decided on a night, and this was in February of 1864. Like I said, things were getting desperate. This was after Battle of Gettysburg, and also Vicksburg in Virginia had fallen, and it was, yeah, they had to do something. So they got out there and they did it. They sunk the ship and never came back. Nobody knows exactly why. Some people even said that their beacon that they had made, they said that they were going to use a lantern with a blue lens to signal people ashore so they could build a fire and they would follow the light of the fire back home. And some people say they saw that blue light, but the Hunley never came back. It was found in 1995. Took them 5 years to really figure out how to get it up off the ocean floor in the same position it was laying there. They did not want to move anything. They wanted to get everything back and be able to see everything. So it took them till 2000, and then finally they started the excavation. Then 2004, all of the men were buried along with the other 2 crews that had died. And then we get to where we are now, where they've pretty much figured out everything they can about the Hunley, and they still do not know exactly what sunk the Hunley. A lot of theories out there. I can't get into all of them right now. Some people say that it was swamped by a rescue ship. Some people say the concussion of the explosion came back and ruptured their lungs. Some people think that it was shot at by a small arms fire and caused a leak. Nobody really knows. But what they do know is that the Hunley was going the wrong direction. It was going further out to sea instead of turning around and coming back. That's part of why it took them so long to figure out where it was. But there you go. Now the young engineer and then later captain that actually ran the successful mission, George Dixon, was the basis of the movie that Ted Turner made a few years ago. I don't know exactly which year it was made. But it has a lot of inaccuracies in it, but still a very good story. And I would definitely recommend finding it on DVD. You can find it at VHS. That's good too. There's plenty of those floating around the thrift stores. But this is it's a pretty good movie. This is how the whole thing operated. The 7 men would sit on benches on one side, which was kind of odd because it seems like they would want to balance it out. To put everybody on one side and then still get it to run level was a feat of engineering in itself. And then here's the pilot right here that ran the joystick, or what they called the whip staff at the time, looked through the portal, gave the signals of when to pump or fill the ballast tanks, and then ran the dive planes. If they wanted to go down, the dive planes were turned downwards, and they wanted to go up, and it's actually much the same as submarines operate even till today. So the sinking and rising was a combination of dive planes and also ballast tanks. These pipes here that were supposed to draw in fresh air when they were close to the surface never really worked properly, so they relied more on just popping the hatches and circulating the air, closing them, and then diving back down. And so when they were going to attack, the idea was that they would ram this this payload of black powder into the side of the ship until it stuck, and then back up, and then when the cord that was attached to it got to its full length, and then they could snatch it back. And it had a pressure cap that worked like one of those party popper kind of things. and it would detonate the payload in the side, and it worked. It actually worked. So still not sure why the Hunley did not come back to port. What we're looking at right now is a prop that was used for the Ted Turner movie, and it's actually 10% larger than the actual Hunley itself. Now these guys were actually chosen for how muscular they were and fed special rations to keep them as muscular as they could get, as they could be. Oh. Actually, this has been changed. You're not allowed to turn this crank. I think there's another one in the other room that you are allowed to turn. Okay. Ooh, so let's see here. Wow. I can just imagine trying to do this. Oh, that is actually very hard work. Now, as you're in here cranking, right through this plexiglass window, you can actually see the gears. You can kind of see them. See them there? That's kind of what they had back then. And I'm telling you, the day that they sunk the Housatonic, it took them an hour of cranking like this to even reach their target. An hour. 7 men in a tiny 14-foot long compartment, 3 feet high, 4 feet high, 3 feet wide, cranking like this for an hour. Finally got to their payload and rammed it. And then what happened? These bolts right here were connected to, I think they were called the kill weights or ballast weights or something like that. Big weights at the bottom. The idea was if they got into an emergency where they really absolutely had to come up, they could grab a couple of wrenches and take these off. The weights would drop, the whole thing would come up. But with all 3 crews that died, they never unlatched these. So apparently they were not as easy to unbolt in an emergency as they thought they were. Here's the deadlights. These were an actual real thing they had. The idea was when they surfaced, the moonlight could come through here and light the inside of the cabin a little better than just a single candle could. And then when they were submerged, if they were only a few feet under the water, they had to close these from the inside, or block them from the inside, so that the candlelight couldn't be seen through the water, and then they could possibly get fired at. So there was actual like little things right here where you could just shoot. Now before you go into the tour, they give you one of these plastic coins that are kind of a replica of that $20 gold piece. And when you come out, you're given the option to vote on how you think the crew died. And it looks like right now the word trapped has got the absolute most votes, with lucky shot and collision being the least. But I've asked them, and you can actually keep your coin. So I'm going to keep this. I'm not going to vote. I'm going to keep this as my keepsake for today. Right here they've got this footage playing on loop. This is when the archaeologists found the coin. They found Dixon's body, and she reached around behind him and felt it in her palm there. And pulled it out, brushed the silt off. That was the first time it was seen, and that a legend had been passed down was confirmed about the gold coin. There are really no pictures of the crew, but from the skeletal remains and documentation, they have recreated their facial features as best they can. And so here are the 8 men that died on the Hunley in the sinking of the Union Housatonic, 1864, February of 1864. There is one picture of George Dixon, but it's not 100% confirmed. But apparently this is what they believe he looked like. And here's a video playing on loop of April of 2004, when this crew, with as much as they could learn from their bones and the way they were positioned, were finally exhumed from the Hunley and then laid to rest in the military graveyard next to the other 2 crews that had died aboard the Hunley with honors. April 17, 2004. This 3D rendering right here is one of the examples of why I love Civil War history so much. This is the experimental ironclad ship, the CSS Chicora, the Confederate Chicora. Right next to it, the Hunley, testing to see if it could dive all the way underneath. 2 experimental ships used successfully in battle years before their time. A good 50 years before their time. Before I wrap up all the editing and go ahead and get this vlog uploaded, there was a few other little wrap-up things I would like to say about it. Number 1, the person that finally funded the expedition that found the Hunley was author Clive Cussler. And if you like at all dramatic books with an emphasis on historic mystery, you would absolutely love Clive Cussler's books. So go check that out. Number 2 is that while we call this the only Civil War submarine, it is in fact one of 3. The first one being the Pioneer, that was sunk in New Orleans to keep the Union troops from finding it. And then their second attempt in Mobile, Alabama, which sunk while it was being towed across a harbor. And so that is laying somewhere out there in that harbor, still waiting to be found. And then this is the third one. Also, the ship that was sunk, the Housatonic. A lot of you will probably think, since this was a Civil War, it was one of those old mast ships that was propelled by wind. Now, the Housatonic did have sails, but it also was a steamship. It could be propelled either way, which just gives you a little more information about how far along into the Industrial Revolution we were by the mid-1860s. So this was no small feat to sink this ship. Also, the Housatonic is still on the bottom of the ocean. The payload that was rammed into the side of the Housatonic was a giant black powder bomb that, when you look at the pictures, it's hard to imagine just how big it was. Guys, that black powder bomb was 130 pounds of black powder. And the Housatonic sank in less than 5 minutes. Only 5 people died in the sinking of the Housatonic. The rest of them, because they were so close to shore, were able to, and they were part of a blockade, they were able to go to other ships and get into the boats and have rescue ships come up and pick them up. When I said the Hunley was 50 years ahead of its time, that turns out to be a lot more true. Once looking into it, it turns out the next ship to be confirmed sunk by a submarine was in September of 1914. Exactly 50 years after the sinking of the Housatonic. The ship that was sunk was in World War I, and it was called the Pathfinder, and even then, it was steam-powered. So, 50 years ahead of its time. Also, I know it might seem like they've got everything under control. They've got a giant building where they did all the archaeology work. They've got a museum, all of that kind of thing. But actually, the building where they did all of the research, digging into the silt and finding the skeletons and doing the computer recreations and all of the work that they did, that building is actually kind of small, and it's not really a museum. It's on a harbor amongst a lot of other like factories and things like that. And they really want to have an actual museum that they can put this in and not have it in a big tank of chemicals and have people walk up on a balcony and just look down into it. They want a nice museum that people can walk all the way around it and really show this thing off properly. And also, they haven't really found everything out about it that they can. There's still more work to be done. And so if you want to help with the preservation of the Hunley and to find it a proper home and a proper museum to have it put in, there are ways that you can help. Just go to hunley.org. Some of the best things you can do is really just talk about it, get your family interested in it, go make it a family trip to take a tour of that facility. But there is ways to donate as well. And so, yeah, guys, as much as American history that we already know, there's still tons of it out there to discover, including the Housatonic still sitting on the ocean floor, as well as those other two unsuccessful Civil War submarines. Still, one sitting out in Louisiana, the other in, I believe, Mobile, Alabama, and then the rest of the Hunley. So guys, if you've enjoyed this video, please don't hesitate to indicate so by hitting that thumbs up like button. Leave something down in the comments section. Subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure to ring that bell icon so you'll start receiving notifications of all my future updates. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.